Hey, I'm Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, in celebration of International Guitar Month, Pete Townsend of The Who will join us.
Pete went deep with us into his relationship with the guitar and with music in general, the new Broadway version of Tommy. He clarified the status and the future of The Who, and much, much more.
Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Chris Hahn, the Aggressive Progressive. Check out a new episode of the Aggressive Progressive podcast every Tuesday. You know, the election is heating up just as the year is winding down. Stick with me. I'll tell you the truth as I see it. Download the Aggressive Progressive on Pandora or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, yo, this is Big Daddy Kane, and you're listening to another hot interview on The Library with Tim Einenkel on rapstation.com.
Growing up, living life with no concern with it. Permanent curves in the road, we just turned with it. Was like a tournament. How we played on the streets of this big apple that got a worm in it. Had to earn in it. Packed groceries and toted bags just so we could sport imported tags. And though we didn't have a wealth of grain, stepping on the scene, crisp and clean, gave us self-esteem.
Masta Ace, legendary MC, Juice Crew member, he is the gold standard when it comes to lyricism. Not only is he an accomplished solo artist, he's also a member of EMC, touring the planet on a regular basis, and obviously showing everyone how it should be done. He and his label, M3 Records, recently inked a deal with Penalty Entertainment and is currently working on a new album, which is scheduled for release in mid-2015. Masta Ace, welcome to the library with Tim Einenkel on rapstation.com.
Good to be here, man. Looking forward to it.
So I want to start from the way beginning. You were born in Brownsville, Brooklyn. And I read that your early hip-hop influences were just dudes that were around the corner rhyming in the park. So 2 questions. Do you remember any of those lyrics that they came up with? Any, like, not even just, it doesn't have to be the exact lyrics, but concepts they were coming up with? And also, how do those local artists, still influence you today in your rhymes?
Well, the main guy for me in my neighborhood was a guy named Charlie Watt. He actually lived in my building, Charles Hardison. I lived on the 7th floor. He lived on the 6th floor. And he would walk around with his radio, his big radio, playing his raps that he would do in the house or in the park. And his signature thing that he would always say, because back then, like, rappers always had, like, certain kind of things that they would say in between before they got to the next written rhyme. So they'd be like, to the beat, y'all, and you don't stop, that kind of stuff. That wasn't written. That was just something to fill in the blanks before you got to the next beginning of the next rhyme. And so his thing was, he would always say, to the beat, mother butter, to the beat, mother butter, to the beat, mother butter, to the beat. And then he would start his next rhyme. So anytime you heard that, to the beat, mother butter, I don't know where he got that from, but that was his signature kind of line that connected his rhymes together. And like I say, he lived in my building and he used to rap out in the park, and he was one of the first guys that I looked up to from an MC standpoint.
So are you still connected with those guys? I mean, do they ever, like, say, oh, I just heard your new album? Or, I mean, do you talk to them about how they influenced you?
I haven't seen Charles in many, many, many years, like since we were kids, really. But through the miracle of Facebook, we've found each other, and I actually spoke to him on the phone probably like about 6-8 months ago. Spoke to him on the phone, and just kind of filled each other in on each other's lives. I mean, we're talking about decades, like, you know. So it's like, you know, yeah, I'm married, I got kids in college, this and that, and so that's pretty much what the conversation, you know, was about. I lost touch with a lot of people from my neighborhood, but there are still a handful of people that through Facebook that you still kind of connect with.
So you've done concept albums as a solo artist, you know, A Long Hot Summer, Disposable Arts, and you've also done concept albums as a group with, like, EMC. You've also done albums obviously without concepts. For you, how do you keep coming up with these themes when you do these concept albums? But 2, what's easier for you? I mean, is it easier to kind of have a game plan, I guess, of, like, this is my album, this is going to be the concept, or is it kind of better to be more free form for you?
Well, how I keep coming up with them, just to answer the first part of your question, is I don't come up with them. They come to me. Like, I really believe that somewhere in the universe, you know, I'm influenced creatively. I don't know where that source or where that place is from, but I find myself waking up 4 o'clock in the morning for no reason, and then not being able to fall back to sleep, and then I get these brilliant ideas, and I can only, you know, blame that on something beyond myself. And so once I sort of found the concept album as something that I enjoyed doing, I knew that I wanted to continue to do that over and over and over again. Each time there was a concept album on the table, or an album on the table, and I had to figure out a way to connect the songs together and make it a cohesive story. That was always the challenge for me, because I've always been a writer. Before I was a rapper, I was a writer, you know, all the way back to as far back as 6th grade, 7th grade, you know, I was writing stories. And it's just something that's in me. And when I make these concept albums, the storyline around the album is an exercise for me. And it's a challenge as well, because now you're trying to make this story that you're trying to tell in between songs connect to the songs in some way. And so I've just enjoyed doing that, and I'll continue to do those kinds of albums, because for me as a writer, they're just a lot of fun to do.
After your solo album, one of the things you did Masta Ace and Masta Ace Incorporated. And I read, and you said in Brian Coleman's Check the Technique Volume 2, you said the reason why you wanted a crew was because you realized at the time groups sold a lot more than solo artists. How much, I guess then compared to now, does your artistic process or your artistic decision-making depend on the financial gain? Is it, I mean, how do you weigh, I guess, financial gain versus not, versus your artistic vision?
Honestly, it doesn't play into my thinking at all anymore. Many years ago, when I was signed to these different labels and distributed by these majors, you know, I had to think in a more, I had to think in terms of sales and how to, what's the best way to get sales, and what's the best way to, you know, make a record that's gonna do this or do that. And I'm happy to say that I'm free from that. I'm now that I'm independent, I don't have to think in those terms anymore, and it's actually been positive and beneficial to me. I feel like I've made better decisions and better records now that I'm not focused on the bottom line, or focused on, well, the label wants something that's going to be able to play on the radio, so I need to go in and make this type of song. It's just a great feeling to be able to go in and just literally make the exact song you want to make, the exact album you want to make, and it come out exactly the way you wanted to make it, and you didn't think about, this has to be a song for the radio, or this has to be a song for this group of people, or this has to be a song for the commercial crowd. You just went in and you just made an honest record. I definitely don't long for those days when I was in those situations on those majors and forced to make those kinds of decisions. And I'm happy where I am. I'm independent and I'm loving it.
Speaking of weighing in on groups versus solo, how different is it for you when you're creating music within a group, and also versus being a solo artist? I mean, are there advantages and disadvantages? And one thing I'm wondering is, has there ever been a point where in a group you're doing let's say with emcee, for example, you're doing a song, you only have this much time, and you start writing lyrics and you realize, oh crap, I'm so inspired, I have enough for a whole song right here, or even a whole album. So has there been any times where you've held out those lyrics for another album or another track or another record for your solo stuff? And if so, can you tell us which tracks those might have been?
Well, that's never actually happened, but what I will say is that creating for a group as opposed to creating for myself, The group thing is a lot easier. It's a lot less stress, a lot less pressure, because you're really only going to be responsible for a verse. And so it definitely cuts down on the amount of writing that you have to do, which is always fun. But at the same time, as kind of the director of the album, I still have more work to do beyond just, like, if I could just write my verses and then just, call me when the album's done. Like, but I can't do that. I'm actually, after I write my parts, then I have to reach out for the features, reach out for the choruses, the hooks. We all kind of contribute to that, but I'm kind of the overseer to making sure that all of those things connect, and I have to make sure that the side artist contracts are signed and filled out, and all the paperwork and all of that is involved. Then I have to figure out the skit, the storyline, bring people in to record the skits, write the skits. So there's still a lot involved in it for me, but I enjoy it, so I'm not complaining. But when I'm writing for myself, that's when I really can run away with it and get lost in the beat and just start writing verse on top of verse, or writing 24-bar verses, 30-bar verses. But when I know I'm working on EMC, I know that I'm going to cut myself off, and unless it's really something super like pressing, like, guys, I really got to do a 24 on this, like, that hasn't happened. And I think we all each do a good job of kind of deferring to the other person, letting everybody kind of get their stuff off, and we just good at communicating and creating, and everybody staying on the same page with what we're doing.
I read that it wasn't until you shot the video for the Symphony where you felt your career kind of jumped off, and you knew you wanted to pursue this as a career. But have you ever thought of, like, if you weren't doing this, what you would be doing? And then also, how much do you think hip-hop culture would play a part into that alternative career?
I went to college. I got my degree in marketing. I had enough credits for a minor in advertising, and advertising was actually what my concentration was. It just so happened that the school that I graduated from, University of Rhode Island, they didn't offer advertising as a major, so I had to take marketing. But what I did was, all of my elective classes, every class that I took within the business school, the School of Business, was geared towards advertising. My goal was to, when I graduated from college, to get a job at one of the advertising agencies. I wanted to write television commercials. I wanted to, the Budweiser commercials, the funny commercials, the radio spots, the print ads. I just knew that I wanted to create in that way. And so, when I left college, that was what I was about to embark on, and then all of a sudden this music thing just kind of happened. And the Symphony, when the Symphony video dropped, that was what kind of cemented my place as an artist that people knew. They put my name across the screen. They showed my face on a freeze frame. They showed my face, my name, and from that point, things have been completely different. Like, the day that video came out, I came back around my neighborhood and everybody was losing their minds, going crazy, because they couldn't believe that was me, and it just turned into this whole thing. And then I got to kind of see the other side of it, the so-called fame side of it, and how people start to act a little weird and different. And people who you've been friends with, your whole life, all of a sudden are not sure how to approach you, or act like they don't know how to speak to you exactly. They don't know if you're going to act different. So I got to see some of that stuff, really from the time that video dropped. But my life has been different ever since. I've been in the music business since that happened. I never actually even took an interview for an advertising job, because the music thing just went. It flew. I mean, it was overnight.
Compared to music versus advertising, what was the weight of, like, how passionate were you about advertising versus how passionate were you about music?
I was very passionate about advertising. When I was in college, I was part of a team that competed. My school competed against other colleges for an opportunity to basically create an entire advertising campaign for Nestle's Alpine White Chocolate Bar. That was a new product at the time.
Pretty good.
Yeah, I've tried it. I'm not a fan of white chocolate, but No, I was very passionate about it. It was fun to me. It was exciting to me to come up with a concept for an ad campaign to figure out how the spot was going to run, what the music was going to be, and that's where the music part of it comes from. I know that if I had gone into advertising instead of into music, I know that hip hop and the sounds of hip hop would still be prevalent in whatever I was going to be creating for whatever advertising campaign I was going to be working on. I know that some of those beats, some of those songs, those great musical songs would have been somehow finding their way into whatever I was doing on the advertising side.
There's a lot of criticism about today's hip hop music that you hear on the radio. You've talked about how you think hip hop needs diversity, and it also needs diversity in order to be in a good place. But it seems that in terms of getting any radio play, that diversity card is kind of thrown out the window. I guess, how are you working to try to get diversity back into radio? Are you at a point in your career where it's not about radio play for you anymore?
It's not about commercial radio play. What has kept me going is college radio, is internet radio, is underground radio, it's Spotify, it's whatever other forms of it's satellite radio, whatever other forms besides the commercial FM airwaves in the United States that a person can find music and listen to it. That's what it's about for me. And in a lot of ways, those other formats reach more people, if you really think about it. It's not about commercial radio for me anymore. That doesn't mean to say that if we stumble upon a great record that commercial radio decides to play, that I'm going to be like, oh, I hate this. This is whack. Why are they playing my song? I'm not going to do that. I'll embrace it. But what I'm not doing is chasing it. I'm not trying to go in the studio and make a record that I think Hot 97 might play, or that I think not KTU might play. Like, I'm not in the studio trying to do that. If we find a great record that we like, we record it, we put it out there to the world. If somebody from one of those stations decides, hey, this is a kind of a cool record, then we see where we can go from there. If they want to give us a spin, great. It's expensive, especially as an independent, to get in that game. Just to get in that game is about $100,000. Just to be in the mix of it, it's like you got to commit $100,000. And so for an independent label, a lot of times, you're not even able to compete in the first place to even get a spin on a commercial station. So that's why we don't even look at it.
It also seems like, if you talk about commercial radio, you also talk about timeless music, right? And it seems like commercial radio right now, there's no timeless music. And then you look at stuff like what you do and emcee and also other artists, they do timeless music. A track that I've always appreciated that you were featured on is when 2004 you were featured with Ed O.G.'s My Own Worst Enemy, and you were featured on the track Wishing. Can you briefly talk about the creation of that track? But also, is this a case because of the lyrical content of what you guys were talking about at that time, that you kind of wish it wasn't timeless music, because you could totally play that track today and everything you guys talked about is exactly what's happening today?
Yeah, it's a great song, and it always amazes me. People to this day will reach out to me on Twitter and just mention that song, or they're playing it right now, and people are still discovering that song. Edo asked me to be a part of it, and I was glad that he did. I was happy that it was a song that was about something. I was excited to write my verse and attack it the way I did. I was even more excited that the song, got played on the Boondocks TV show. That was pretty cool. And they played my verse. Like, I was like, wow, that's an Edo song, but I got a little bit of a couple of my lines got played. That was cool. The fact that a lot of those lyrics still apply today just kind of shows you where we are in the world. We've made tremendous progress as a society, but we have a long way to go. That's just what it is.
I have a few more questions. On M.A. Doom, Son of Yvonne, the record 1970-something, you talk about being raised, and I quote, on the sounds of the 70s. And then you go on to talk about the music from that decade. You talk about Earth, Wind & Fire, Curtis Mayfield, Aretha Franklin, Al Green, to name a few. How have these records influenced you in your creative process? And also, how important do you think it is for kind of today's up-and-coming hip-hop artists to actually listen to these records in order to sustain, I guess, a long career?
Well, that music, the 70s music, was a huge influence on me because that record collection that was in my apartment in the projects in Brownsville that belonged partially to my mother and partially to my uncle Marvin, those albums, those vinyl, those 45 discs were the first music that I sampled for my first album. I would sit there, listen to those records, find a loop that I really loved, and then I would take those same records up to Marley Marl's house, and I would say, yo, I want to loop this, I want to sample, I want to rap to this. And he would obviously create the beat and do his magic to it. But that music was the backdrop for my childhood. You know, it's so funny when you're 8, 9, 10 years old. You're doing kid stuff, like you're playing with your army men or whatever it is that you're playing with, or whatever you're doing. And in the background, there's music playing from the living room. You're taking a bath. You're taking a bath. You're playing with your toys in the bathtub, but there's music playing, and you might not be paying attention to it as a 10-year-old kid, but it's seeping in, and you hear that same song when you're 25, and it immediately hits you in your soul. You might not remember that you were taking a bath at the time that song was playing, but it brings you right back to the smells of your apartment, the sounds, whatever was happening around you at that time. It immediately transports me back to being a 10-year-old kid and hearing Earth, Wind, and Fire playing constantly on repeat, literally in my house. And so yeah, those songs, those records really shaped me. In terms of today's artists, the young artists coming up, that's not going to be their music. That's not going to be their music because their parents are going to be younger. So their parents are going to be listening to probably Tribe Called Quest, Mobb Deep, NWA, and that was their generation. So when they were 10 and 11, that's probably what was playing in the background for them. So 90s hip-hop would be what they would have grown up on. So I don't expect them to be familiar with Earth, Wind, and Fire and Al Green and Aretha Franklin and that kind of stuff necessarily. If somebody in their family exposes them to that, then that's great. That's just another level of being connected to music. But I expect them to at least be connected to whatever was playing in their house at that time. Different kids from different parts of the world, or at least in the country, there was a completely different music movement happening in, like, if you came from Atlanta, what was playing in the households in Atlanta in the mid-90s or the early 90s might be different than what was playing in a household from a kid from the Bronx. And so, that kid that was 10 years old living in Atlanta might have been hearing something completely different. And a kid in the Bronx might have been listening to, some real, like, Grandmaster Flash Furious 5, Treacherous 3, whatever was playing in the background for them. They connect more with that. It's all generational though, and it's definitely fun to talk about and think and to have dialogue about those kind of topics.
Because I'm just wondering, because obviously hip hop when it was created was sampling, it's taking something. Taking nothing and making it something, right? So the lost music, rock, whatever, was sampled. And now today you have, like you said, the kids today are going to be listening to probably Tribe, but then when they grow up, the music that their kids might hear will probably be like today's artist who doesn't, or, like a Pitbull, or, whatever. So I guess I was wondering if this is like the secret to a long career is having that background of old rock, of old soul music, or is it eventually, are we gonna continue a cycle of just having one-hit wonders, because as kids grow up, they're just going to be, their influences are going to be one-hit wonders.
I mean, there's always going to be one-hit wonders. There always has been. You know, as kind of more hip-hop purists, we might sometimes get a little bit depressed about the state of hip-hop and the music that's being, you know, played, and the lack of maybe lyrical skill that's happening on some of the records and stuff like that. But I always have to remind myself that this phenomenon has always existed in hip-hop. There has always been whack dudes on the radio that sold tons and tons of records, and they were mad popular. So, you know, let's not pretend in our 40s like, oh, this is this new thing now. These cats they're terrible and they're selling all these records. This has always been here. It's always been people that we thought were terrible that sold tons of records, that were popular with the commercial hip hop audience, and this is nothing new. There's going to be, every year there's going to be some good music that's going to come out. There's going to be some artists that stand the test of time and that continue to, you know, and they may not, unfortunately, do the sales numbers that the whack dude's going to do. But they're going to build a consistent fan base where they'll be able to tour and perform for decades and decades, and that's really what it's about. The one-hit wonders we'll find out when, you know, when the big house money and the big car money all dwindle away because the song's not popular anymore and nobody's booking them for shows because they're on to the next new one-hit wonder. And then they go from a whole lot to nothing overnight, while the cat who wasn't getting those radio spins is still touring and making tons and, you know, has tons and tons of fans that are going to continuously come out to support them. They'll find out at that point. It's one of those things. It's a cycle thing, and you just have to watch. You know, there's certain songs and certain artists that you can point to from, say, 10 years ago that had a hot record that was killing the radio, that was, oh, this guy's killing it, and then you can't find him now. Like, he's just completely, he's in the studio, allegedly, but he can't be found. And there's lessons learned, man. You know, I'm glad I took the route that I took.
Listen here and feel my words, but something's wrong with y'all and nothing wrong with me. And happy in my life is what I long to be, and happy in my life is what I'm going to be. What you see in me is what I was born to be. From the day that my mom's first birthed the child, she didn't need the world to make it worth the while. So I don't need no magazine to reach the pinnacle. Screw the review and you can eat the interview, cause that's what y'all seem to tend to do. Them cats you cover all seem identical, but through it all I weave like the Parker's hair and shine underground cause it's darkest there. Yeah,
I keep moving along, keep bringing it on, and keep singing a song, but y'all ain't listening. I keep moving along, keep bringing it on, and keep singing a song, but y'all ain't listening. I keep moving along, keep bringing it on, and keep singing a song, but y'all ain't listening. I keep moving along, keep bringing it on, and keep singing the song.
Y'all industry niggas should be feeling ashamed. Y'all like, he ain't stealing the game, we stealing the name. But wait just a sec, that's straight disrespect. If you take shit and jet, then don't be late with the check. I'm on the underground trying to scrape and scrounge. It sure will feel good to take a break and lounge. All these ups and downs like a roller coaster. Life is the bitch, I'm trying to hold her closer. I'm killing every nigga in sight. The bigger the dog, the bigger the fight. If you really say you know me, then you figured I might try to use my anger as a trigger to write. I put it down simple on the paper or pad and try to take a stab at what is making me mad. I jump on the track and I ride it through and do it for the people that are tried and true. But y'all so fickle, y'all love me today and tomorrow love another cat and shove me away. But most ain't committed to do it how I did it, in the way that I did it, in the way that I spit it. It's like my verse the truth and it might hurt the booth, but first the proof, it gave birth to youth. Rap's like trying to take a piss in the wind. I'm just glad to know that some of y'all were listening in. Yeah,
I keep moving along, keep bringing it on, and keep singing a song, but y'all ain't listening. I keep moving along, keep bringing it on, and keep singing the song, but y'all ain't listening. I keep moving along, keep bringing it on, and keep singing the song, but y'all ain't listening. I keep moving along, keep bringing it on, and keep singing the song. But y'all ain't listening.
Hey, I'm Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, in celebration of International Guitar Month, Pete Townsend of The Who will join us.
Pete went deep with us into his relationship with the guitar and with music in general. The new Broadway version of Tommy. He clarified the status and the future of The Who and much, much more.
Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Chris Hahn, the Aggressive Progressive. Check out a new episode of the Aggressive Progressive podcast every Tuesday. You know, the election is heating up just as the year is winding down. Stick with me. I'll tell you the truth as I see it. Download the Aggressive Progressive on Pandora or wherever you get your podcasts.